There we go. Okay.
Okay.
So would you like me to go first or would you?
Yes, absolutely. Tell me, how do you think it went? All those things.
I think in terms of the like InTASC standards, it really wasn't well met. One thing that I kind of get a little overthinky about in kind of like a Foucault sort of sense is that like I feel like how can we really I guess qualitatively assign a numerical value for like just speech output, so I sometimes feel like, oh, is this really a 3 or is it really a 5, you know what I mean? So that's kind of why in the past I've kind of shied away from I guess grading oral output or oral participation, aside from whether they speak or not. However, I mean, looking back at it, I kind of feel like it's a missed opportunity. And I think going forward, like once we return to the physical classroom in August, it'll be a little bit harder, but more valuable. However, for present circumstance, it's a little bit more manageable and perhaps even more valuable. So yeah, that's my input.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And I think especially as you begin to be the person developing curriculum, you need to, when you have an objective or you create standards or whatever, it looks like you're using IB, you also then need to have criteria for assessment of some kind, right? How do I know if they're growing and learning? And that might just be, I remember keeping a clipboard with, my checklist of skills that I'm constantly monitoring. And that way I can tick some of those as I have opportunities. And it might be observing students in a center, or something where I'm identifying letter sounds. Can they name all the letters? Can they give me the sounds? Do you know what I mean? So that, because that's hard to do all at once with a student, but you can do it over time. And so it's developing those systems that work for you. And observation is huge in early childhood. So that's a great way to kind of do that.
Because
Yeah, go ahead.
What I was thinking was, the school doesn't really, the current school doesn't really require a whole lot of data, but I still feel like, at least for myself, holding myself accountable, like keeping, even if no admin ever looks at it and I'm the only person to ever even open this file for a whole year, I still feel like this is kind of something that I can use to, I guess, hold myself accountable, but also have this data on hand. So, because at some point, someone is going to say, oh, if only we had data,
Well, you're going to find yourself in a school that's going to require it. And even all that aside, the purpose of lumping together 6, 7, and 8, and I think you reflected on that really well, is that it drives your instruction. So if you think about if you're in the physical classroom, you're planning instruction and you're creating, you're doing center time, right? I'm hoping you'll have center time. So then I look at my data and I say, wow, I've got these 3 kids that are still kind of low, right? So then I might structure my center time so that I have small group during center time. So as students are rotating through centers, I'm going to pull that small group. And I'm going to be able to provide differentiation for those kids, maybe approach things in a different way. And really a good solid early childhood classroom does that automatically because you're providing multisensory opportunities for kids to work with letters, work with sounds, do you know what I mean? But if you have data, then you can better differentiate for all of those students.
You're right. Yeah, I think perhaps what I did in the physical classroom before the lockdown is maybe a few steps below what you're talking about. Because I always really kind of, because we do have circle time and we do have small group interaction and activity groups, but I always just was kind of like, okay, well, these are the high performing students, and maybe these are the just average or proficient students, and then these are the perhaps like in need of assistance. Someone in my cohort said they verbalized it so much more concise. They said approaching proficiency, and as opposed to like maybe more like negative language. And I really like that because I've for the past 4 years I've used working towards proficiency, but I feel like approaching proficiency just is so much more trademark. You know what I mean? It sounds better. So in the past, I don't know, 6 months of the kindergarten, like I've done it that way, but it's not fueled by data. So I feel like there's a lot of room for error, because it's just qualitative assessment really. So I can really see the value in what you're saying and how it's applicable to my current class.
Yeah, and as you put together your whatever strategy you use, I know there are lots of ways to do this on an iPad or things like that, so you can quickly be checking, but definitely set it up in that way, so that what that means. What does meeting the proficient, approaching, exceeding, right? So that you understand what that means. I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you've answered a couple of my questions because, of course, because you're online, we need to think about and address, and you can share this even in your lesson plan. And I didn't see, did you send a lesson plan for this?
I thought it was in the email, but if it isn't, I will immediately send it to you tonight. Yeah.
Okay. So what you might do, and this will be helpful for your instructor too, is, okay, so here you are in an online environment, but what would you be doing in the in-person classroom? And you've just described that so well. So your instructor will see that, because that gives us a better picture, right, of how you would address standards 6, 7, and 8. And I want to say, first of all, going back to your lesson itself, I agree with you. I think you definitely your students, whether you document it yet or not, and you need to be doing that, but you know them. You could sit here and tell me about each student, right? And so and I definitely saw that in the last video for sure. But one of the things that I noticed even in this just short clip is how well you scaffold.
Oh.
You know how to start with previous knowledge, right? We're looking at what letter is this, what sound, and you repeat and repeat. And then scaffolding that to really all the way up to words, and then your chant, that's text, right? And they're learning how to read with repeated, I was trying to think of the word for it, repeated word texts, which are so powerful for this age, right? So that was my first impression, is how well you scaffold. And I think that is 7 and 8. How do we plan for instruction and then scaffold the lesson and sequence it so that students in the end have mastery? So it was lovely. I just love watching you.
Well, thank you very much. I purchased some like Jeremy Harmer and some Scrivener and stuff like that a while back, and during the lockdown I've kind of been flipping through them. So stuff like that kind of gives me some inspiration. So
yeah. Well, and just I mean, just in the beginning, for these little guys, doing your physical stuff when they were first coming in, because one of the key things about children at this age is learning command of their bodies,
Mm,
right? Gross motor skills.
yes.
So you're doing those things to stimulate that and support them. I thought that was lovely. Um, and then as you think about fine motor skills, which are so important, that would be addressed. It's hard to address right now, but when you're in the in-person classroom using multisensory kinds of activities to really, get those little fingers ready, because they're going to be writing and doing things in that way. Let's see, what else did I hang on just a minute.
It's okay. Feel free to take a look. I'll chat for a second. One thing that I do like to do is we have some Play-Doh, and then they are assigned maybe like letter of the week or sound of the week, for example, and then they have to take the Play-Doh and mold it into that letter. So that's one way to kind of get those little fine motor skills going.
Oh, there's so many. One of the things I loved, and I can't remember where I got it, but is using sandpaper.
Sandpaper.
Yeah. So you get those little sheets of sandpaper, and they can, if you need to, you can put little dots on it so they can follow it, to make the letter. But there's something about that texture that is, I'm not finding the words because it's 5 a.m. here.
Is it stimulating or?
Yeah, it's multisensory. And so they can follow it with their finger, but then